Logan Webb, who, by the way, was another guy who was not considered a top prospect, another reason to not look too much into top prospects lists, is going to start his fourth straight opening day for the Giants, becoming just the fourth player in franchise history to do so.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide episodes 3 days a week for now, back to 5 starting in March, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, hosting this show since prior to the 2019 season, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day, or 3 days a week for now. We are 5 days a week, 10 months out of the year, and free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. So check us out there if you have not already, and please just hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. And where we get started, today's going to be all about pitchers for the most part, except we're also going to give you a lineup for tomorrow's game that the Giants are playing. Baseball is officially back as of, this episode is actually, I think, going to get posted on Saturday due to a scheduling conflict for me, even though I'm recording it on Friday. But, and I apologize for that, but the Giants are playing baseball on Saturday. And it's a spring game, yes, but it's exciting nonetheless. But the big news is that, and it's no surprise, Logan Webb is going to start opening day, assuming health, which we should never fully assume, but assuming health, he's going to start opening day, and it'll be his fourth consecutive opening day start. He had a breakout season in 2021. When you look at the final numbers, you're like, that's a guy who could have started opening day, but he hadn't yet broken out yet at that point. And so 2022, 3, 4, and now 5 marks 4. And so some quotes courtesy of Shayna Rubin of the San Francisco Chronicle. She says, with the nod, Webb becomes the fourth Giant in the franchise's history. Oh, excuse me, I didn't see this part when I gave my little open there. Since moving to San Francisco. Okay, so I don't know how many going back to New York. Since moving to San Francisco to start opening day in at least 4 consecutive seasons, joining Juan Marichal, 1964 to 1969, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 6 years in a row. Tim Lincecum, 2009 to 2012, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's 4 years. And Madison Bumgarner, 2014 through 17, 14, 15, 16, 17. That's also 4 years. It's always a little confusing when the difference is 3, but the total is 4 because you count the first year. Anyway, so Logan Webb had this to say, quote, I'm going to try to beat Bum, and hopefully. I'm going to try to beat Bum, hopefully. But it's cool to be in the same conversation as those guys. You talk about the San Francisco Giants. Those are all guys you hear about. It's why most of them and a couple will get their numbers retired. You can say you're in the same conversation as those guys. It's an honor. And I mean, obviously he's right. That is a very exclusive list. Juan Marichal, Tim Lincecum, Madison Bumgarner, and Logan Webb joins them here. Assuming he makes that start, which he will, no matter how his spring performance goes. I think last year he had a horrible spring. People always overreact to spring results. Stuff like velocity being way down, that's a red flag for injury. But like if your stuff is good and you're Velocity is good. It doesn't really matter what your numbers look like in spring, including win-loss record, and this is a drum I beat every year. But Webb continued and said, it's definitely an honor. I never take this stuff for granted. In 2022, we had Carlos Rodon. In 2023, Alex Cobb had a great year the year before. I've always said there's not a number 1 or number 5. We're all on the same page, trying to go out and do the same thing, trying to go out every 5 days and do our thing. Having these guys next to me, there's a reason we're all next to each other in the locker room. I'm the young guy in the group, so I get to learn from them every day. And Robbie Ray obviously isn't going to start opening day, but he didn't even mention Robbie Ray. Maybe he did and it wasn't included in the quote. But Robbie Ray is a former Cy Young winner himself. And Justin Verlander has won multiple Cy Youngs, has won, I think, an MVP award. And obviously he's not going to start opening day either. So there's no question who should start opening day. That's not what we're talking about here. And it doesn't just mean, the Giants have a weak rotation and Logan Webb is just the best of a weak rotation. That's not at all what's going on here. There's a little article on Fangraphs I'm seeing right now called The Best of the 2025 Post Prospects, and there's a picture of Marco Luciano. So that is definitely something to look out for next week. We will get to that. But I just wanted to pull up Logan Webb's kind of numbers and compare him a little bit to the league since, 2020, we could just do since 2022 when he made his first opening day start. But I think that it's more appropriate to look all the way back to 2021 because that was a great season for him too. And so if we look during that time and set the minimum to 0 innings, so anybody qualifies, Logan Webb is 5th in Fangraphs wins above replacement. 5th. Tied, let me just say, the list goes Zach Wheeler, Corbin Burns, ouch, should have signed him. Kevin Gausman, also kind of an ouch there, although he had a rough season last year and 2 more years on that contract. Aaron Nola, 4th, and then Logan Webb, 5th. Dylan Cease on the Padres, annoying, 6th, and Garrett Cole, 7th. So, so that's with a minimum of 0 innings. So that's just, because WAR is a cumulative stat, and so there should be no minimum that we set for that. Because if you put up 20 WAR in a season, why should we discount you just because you don't have a sufficient number of innings? Nobody does that, but if they did, they should be counted. Okay, so during that span, Logan Webb, a big part of it is innings. He, since 2021, is not first, but second in innings with 761 and a third innings. Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler, both on the Phillies, are first and third, and Webb is sandwiched in between them. He's only 17 innings shy of Aaron Nola for number 1. And I think if we sort by starting in 2022, Webb may be first. Webb has a 3.18 ERA over this span, a 2.99 fielding independent pitching. So he has underperformed his expected stats, essentially. The Giants have had some rough defensive years when he's been here, so that explains that in a way. Not necessarily, but it does. And then his ground ball rate in that span is 59%, which now we do need to sort by innings, because if I don't, we've got a bunch of guys who have 100% ground ball rate because they've thrown a third of an inning and they got a ground ball in their 1/3 of an inning that they've ever played. So now we're going to look for qualified pitchers, and Logan Webb is second. Framber Valdez of the Astros is first with a 62.4% ground ball rate. Alex Cobb actually is third with a whatever, it doesn't matter. Logan Webb second, first in the National League with a 59% ground ball rate. How about home runs per 9 innings? Logan Webb at 0.60. That is numero uno in baseball since 2021. And guess who's number 2, by the way? Tyler Rogers with a 0.66 home runs per 9. And Tyler Rogers also a 2.90 ERA since 2021 in 301 innings. So can we stop the Tyler Rogers hate? I don't know. It's the new Brandon Belt. I don't get it. Anyway, more about Logan Webb, more about a lineup that we have for tomorrow's game and people on the bench. It's just actual baseball. And then a lot more about the Giants' new pitching coach. I read just an amazing write-up by a profile by Susan Slusser of the Chronicle about JP Martinez, and we'll give you some very juicy nuggets from that write-up in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you in part by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3, which is pretty fun if you're a Warriors fan, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, here we go. We are going to finish up our conversation about Logan Webb. We're going to get into the lineup for the Giants game on Saturday. I'm going to try to publish this on Friday, but it may not come out until Saturday. And we're going to get into JP Martinez and just this amazing profile that Susan Slusser did in the San Francisco Chronicle. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen 3 days a week for now, back to 5 in March. Everydayers coming up next week. I got a ton of content. This is the beauty of once spring training starts, is there's just so much content to talk about, including that one I just discovered live on the air about I've been beating this drum over and over. If you're an everydayer on this show, players who are not technically prospects anymore because they've graduated, like it's an official thing. Like if you're not eligible, if you're not rookie eligible, you're not a prospect, and so you don't make it on prospect lists, and they don't count you when they're ranking farm systems. But the Giants have, I could try to figure this out, but probably as many, if not more than any team, they have a bunch of players who fall into that category of not yet established major leaguers, but also not technically prospects because they've graduated from rookie status, and they've just got a ton of guys, a lot of pitchers, and then some position players too, like Marco Luciano, Luis Matos, Elliot Ramos, Tyler Fitzgerald. It's a long list. So that's going to be a fascinating read, and we'll get to that next week. But continuing on, Logan Webb, it wasn't his best season in 2024. In fact, there were some concerning signs in that his expected ERA, which is like a StatCast metric based on quality of contact, strikeout rate, walk rate, etc., like stuff where they can predict what your ERA kind of should have been. Like basically if you got kind of hit hard but the ball found gloves, that it can kind of indicate that. And for him it was 431, which is by far the worst it's been since his 2020 season when he had a 5.47 ERA and a 5.23 expected ERA. Since then, the expected ERA has actually climbed every single year from 318 to 359 to 363. That's basically no change from 359 to 363. You also have to consider what league average is. And actually, well, never mind. I think, never mind. I don't want to get too complicated here, but then it jumped up to 431 last year. But his fielding independent pitching was the best it had been since 2021. And his ERA, though, was the highest it had been since 2020. So it was kind of a weird year for Logan Webb. There's an article I have in the docket. I haven't read it yet about how the title of it is why Giants ace Logan Webb wants to change things up to regain his elite changeup, by Shayna Rubin of the Chronicle. So anyway, it's just an honor to start opening day when you start racking up consecutive opening days like this. And he is signed through 2028. So 5, 6, 7, 8. He has a chance for 4 more opening day starts as long as he's healthy and effective. And then, of course, they could extend him even further. So it's just been a great success story. And once again, I will remind you, he was not considered a great prospect at all. So that just goes to show you, in baseball, it happens all the time. Top prospects bust, and kind of non-prospects become among the best players in the game. So we don't know much. We know a lot, but we don't know everything for sure in baseball. So I could go on and on about his numbers and since this year and that year, but I think that's sufficient for now. And I want to just give you the lineup for this game on Saturday as the Giants are facing the Texas Rangers, Bruce Bochy's Texas Rangers on Saturday. The game time is to be determined by me. It's not actually to be determined. I just don't actually have it pulled up. I assume it's a day game. It's at 12:05 Pacific, and it's at 12:05 Pacific, and the lineup is as follows. They're going to have, it doesn't matter, don't read too much into a first spring training game lineup, but Lamont Wade Jr. DHing batting first. Marco Luciano in left field batting second. That's relevant because this is the first time he's ever going to play, I think, it's not technically a professional game, spring training game, but nonetheless, Luciano outfielder is a new thing. And again, he was on the front page of that article on Fangraphs about players who are not technically rookies, but are players to watch. So the fact that he's moved to the outfield, big deal. And then how about this? Jung-Hoo Lee is back and batting third and playing center tomorrow. Luis Matos batting fourth and in right field. Again, don't read too much into the lineups. Jake Lamb, non-roster invitee, formerly good Arizona Diamondback. We did a little bit of a deep dive on him and discussed, I was just kind of unenthused by the minor league pickup there and mentioned that he hasn't really had a good year since 2017. He had some good, he was with the Dodgers for a hot minute a few years ago and was good then, and then got traded to the Mariners and then wasn't good anymore. I think it was the Mariners. And then Sam Huff, I think his first name is Sam, is catching and batting sixth. Casey Schmidt is playing third and batting seventh. Brett Wisely playing second and batting eighth. And Basabe, I forget his first name, Oslavis Basabe, who they traded for after he had been DFA'd by the Rays. And he's Luis Matos' cousin, and also the cousin of former Giant, I'm forgetting the other player's first name, Basabe, who played a little bit in 2020. And he's playing shortstop. And then Landon Roop is starting. And then if you look at the extras for the game, Bryce Eldridge is there on the bench. Don't be like, why isn't Bryce Eldridge playing? It's game 1 of spring training. There's some kind of reason, and it doesn't matter. He'll play plenty. Grant McCray on the bench. Wade Meckler on the bench. Alcantara, I don't know who that is. Koss Don't know who that is. VR, David VR. I was like, Pillar, Kevin Pillar? No. And Porter. I gotta look onto the full list of Giants spring training roster to figure out who some of these guys are. And then they've got pitchers, Kaiwei Tang, Cole Waits, and then a handful of other pitchers, not really house name brand pitchers, who are going to pitch in this game. It's game 1 of spring training. So anyway, it's an interesting lineup to watch. If this game is watchable, I will try in this moment to access denied. Great, thank you. I do not know if this game is viewable on television. I know the Giants aren't going to broadcast it because I think they're broadcasting 3 games this year from spring training, something like that. So when in doubt, assume the Giants will not be broadcasting it, but hopefully if the Rangers are, it's possible it's on MLB Network, or if you have MLB.TV, you could watch it that way. But I wouldn't assume the Rangers aren't one of those teams that broadcast like every game like some teams do, the Dodgers. There's also an article, speaking of stuff we can get to, where Larry Baer commented on thankfully somebody asked him, I think it was another Chronicle writer, John Shea perhaps, asked Larry Baer about the Giants' lack of spring training coverage and how they don't broadcast nearly as many games as some rivals. And he had his reasons, and it was about basically there's not a big audience for it. So those of us who really want to watch, we're not in the majority, apparently. Anyway, everything I click is saying access denied. So we're not going to be able to tell you if it's on TV, but just check for yourself. Even though the Giants aren't broadcasting it, the other teams sometimes do. And then if you have MLB Network or if you have MLB.TV, you can watch those games if they're on MLB Network. You get what I'm saying. Anyway, we're not going to have time to get to everything I wanted to say about JP Martinez, but we're going to at least give you the best of what I have here coming up in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you in part by Wonderful Pistachios. Are you looking for a snack that is both delicious and nutritious? Who isn't, right? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack for busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk right here or on a road trip or just need a quick protein boost, they're always my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. So just get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, here we go. We are going to get into the fascinating little, why do I keep saying it and then forgetting it, profile of JP Martinez, who's the Giants' new pitching coach. So last season, I saw a YouTube video that featured JP Martinez and Ryan Walker, and JP Martinez was talking about what made Ryan Walker so good, and it was fascinating. And it was like Martinez understood like baseball. He wasn't just some analytics nerd. I can say that because I'm into analytics myself, so I don't really mean nerd in like a derogatory way. So he's a baseball guy. He played professional baseball, but also he really understands the analytics. And I'm actually very thrilled that he is the Giants' new pitching coach. Remember last year it was Brian Price, kind of like with his like swan song season as pitching coach, with JP Martinez as an assistant, and he's been here this whole time since 2020 when Gabe Kapler first came in. And so the title of the article is Meet the Giants' Renaissance Man Who Brings, quote, 1,000-foot view to pitching staff. And you'll learn what that means the more I read about this. And so this is by Susan Slusser of the Chronicle, and it's worth a full read if you get the chance. So just some of the highlights here. Slusser writes, JP Martinez is a Renaissance man, a student of architecture, a reader of Stoic philosophy and John Muir, and most handy for all for a baseball team, he's fluent in Spanish. And so that was like the main part I wanted to highlight from that. And then former fellow Twins minor league pitching coordinator Pete Maki, who is now the Twins pitching coach, said of Martinez, he's well-traveled. He's into good music and going to concerts. He's a linguist. The first thing JP did for me was make me a list of all the common Spanish baseball terms that aren't in the dictionary. How to talk about grips or staying back. Things you can't do on Duolingo. So I just thought that was a funny quote. As a Duolingo user myself, yeah, it's not teaching me about grips. Although I'm, change up is kind of on there. To change, is on there. But anyway, grips and common Spanish terms, not on there. Anyway, continuing on, the Twins' current pitching coach, Pete Maki, said he's got so many interests and so much breadth and depth, but he's not eccentric at all. He's got good common sense and really good baseball sense. And then Joan Ryan, the author and former Chronicle columnist who now works for the Giants as a media consultant, said she was in the team cafeteria the first spring Martinez arrived in 2021. Okay, so I guess he wasn't there in 2020, or maybe she wasn't. Spring training did happen in 2020, and then it got shut down. Anyway, sitting by herself, and Martinez was sitting several tables away. He finally came over and hesitantly asked, "Did you write intangibles?" It turned out that he'd listened to the audio version, which Ryan reads herself, and he was a big fan of the book on team chemistry. The two are now fast friends. So that's also fascinating. And then Slusser continues, Martinez's unusual skill set includes a gift for analogy, useful when explaining concepts to pitchers, and drawing. He has a degree in graphic design, and instead of writing ideas down, he'll often sketch them instead. For visual learners, that also is a helpful way to get things across. And Sean Jelly said, whenever he's talking to us about something, I feel like by the end of it, there's usually some sort of sketch. That's just how his brain works, and it's helpful for me too because I like to be visual, whether it's talking with your hands or an actual drawing. So this is all fascinating behind the scenes stuff. So great job by Susan Slusser here. And then she continues and says Martinez nearly used those talents to become an architect after his minor league career ended in 2008. He went to LSU's architecture school. 2 years in, he felt burnt out. And then later on, a quote from Martinez, he says, in architecture, they call it plan and section. So this is like a different point here that he's making. And he said, plan is the 1,000-foot view, like the map of the building. And section is like if you cut it in half and you can see the guts. I think that helps when you look at a pitcher too. What does the 1,000-foot view of this guy look like? What are the insides like? What's the delivery, the pitch shapes, the usages? Martinez, this is quoting Susan Slusser. Anytime I'm just reading like this, Martinez realized he had a sufficient break from baseball. And when his high school Isidore Newman in New Orleans needed an assistant coach, he took the job in part because his brother Daniel was on the team. Daniel Martinez, 12 years younger, said, I idolized JP. I always went to his games. I was always in the ballpark watching him. He definitely took me to the next level in terms of baseball IQ. And when I went on to college ball and pro ball, he would text me every game and say, hey, why aren't you getting ahead of hitters? Or why are you throwing this pitch in this situation? He's very good at tailoring his communication to different people. And I liked him being hard on me, giving me constructive criticism. But he was also the first person to pick me up when I needed it. He was very good at separating those things. And then legendary Twins scout Larry Corrigan, who is now retired, said of JP Martinez, I felt like JP was a guy I could really talk to. He wasn't standoffish, and he really made sense to me. He always knew what was going on, and he was a very good coach. I know he has 1 million tons of information now because he knew some expletive back in the day. He's approachable, and he knows what to use and what not to use. And then Minnesota general manager Jeremy Zoll said he just has lots of layers to him, which is cool. Zoll promoted Martinez to pitching coordinator with the Twins in 2018. And he said, I think JP connects with players from all different backgrounds and with all different perspectives, meeting them where they're at, and that's a huge strength. And then basically it gets into how it wasn't a given that Martinez would get the job once Farhan Zaidi was fired and Brian Price retired, and we didn't know what was Posey going to do. Maybe bring in some old school coach with experience. We didn't know. And then he said a week or 10 days after the season, I caught up with Buster in person, and we talked for an hour and a half about pitching and catching. It was like a baseball rat conversation. I would do that if it didn't involve me getting a new job, right? I don't totally understand that quote. When that ended with me getting an offer like this, I was ecstatic. And then Posey had this to say, I was lucky enough to still be a player and get a sense of who JP was as a pitching coach. He comes to the ballpark every day with a lot of energy, and he also has shown the ability to gain the trust of pitchers from all walks of life. Again, being bilingual helps a lot too. That's just Ben saying that. Continuing, Posey says, JP most definitely has a high IQ when it comes to explaining and teaching pitching, but maybe more importantly, he has a keen sense of figuring out how players are motivated. So then they talked about Justin Verlander, and one of his first tasks was kind of figuring out how to approach Justin Verlander when they signed him. And JP Martinez said about Justin Verlander and the signing, he said, I just started digging. I found old tweets, found old articles, found interviews just to make sure that I was prepared to have conversations about stuff that happened in the last 5 years. I just think to be a good pitching coach, you have to be a little bit of a detective. You have to interview witnesses and find clues. If I came in the first day and had Justin doing a bunch of crazy drills and asked him to throw a new pitch, we'd go in opposite directions. The two chatted numerous times after the signing, and Martinez sent Verlander videos. Verlander, who missed time with shoulder and neck issues last year, has mentioned how helpful Martinez has been, particularly when it comes to figuring out how to keep him healthy. And then Ryan Walker, lastly, this is the last thing, said that he had issues with his delivery and that Martinez helped him in his first season, which was 2 years ago. He said, I lost a little bit of velocity. My pitch shapes were a little off. JP helped me recognize where my foot needs to land. And what was funny about that was I was too far down the mound. I needed to be more closed, which is weird. You'd think it'd be the opposite. You'd think if I'm a little less closed, I could probably throw a lot harder. But boom, everything shot back to where it normally is. Last year, Walker said, Martinez diagnosed a slight dip in his arm angle, got him back into his three-quarter slot, and told him to think in terms of throwing more downward. That little mental cue added more depth to his sinker and slider. And then Logan Webb finally says, JP is just the whole package. He's got a brilliant mind, and he could have gone anywhere he wanted. I'm so excited he's doing this with us and not another team. So full circle there with Logan Webb himself, Giants opening day starter 2025, giving a ringing endorsement of JP Martinez. And so am I after reading that article. So anyway, I just read you like a lot of the quotes, but it's still worth checking out. And that's all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day, everydayers. Coming up next week, we got a lot of content to get to. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter or X at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like the show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a ton. So thanks in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again next week. Have a great weekend. Hopefully enjoy some baseball. You are now Locked On Giants.